Tonight on CFTK-TV News, John Rustad recently apologized for some comments on healthcare workers. David Eby has publicly made some more childcare commitments, and it has been a full year since the Israel-Hamas conflict officially begun.
Northwest BC's only television news team. We are CFTK-TV News.
Good evening, I'm Cale Baslett, and here's what's making the news in the Northwest and beyond for today. As was stated in an announcement that was released yesterday, CF Nadino will be hosting 6 weeks worth of transformative webinars, which are designed to give a boost to small businesses. Starting on October 17th, entrepreneurs, small business owners, and community leaders will gather in Smithers to enhance their business strategies and improve customer experiences. The event is said to be hosted at the Smithers Council Chambers, but you could also attend virtually by emailing ecdev@smithers.ca beforehand. Also starting earlier today, the Nation to Nation Forum will be underway at the Thornhill Community Center. Over the next 3 days, there will be community tours with the Haisla and Nisga'a nations, along with guest speakers and business pitches to go around. More information can be found on the Nation to Nation website. The BC Northern Real Estate Board just released their third quarter update for this year, where just over 3,600 properties were sold, worth $1.5 billion sold through MLS. Compared to this point last year, it is a 14% increase of real estate sales. Municipalities like Vanderhoof, Prince Rupert, and Williams Lake are some of the areas that have seen the largest growth over a year-long period. For other areas in the Northwest, Kitimat sees an increase from 92 to 98, while Terrace dropped from 118 to 110. Now to the BC election, which saw the Conservative leader once again make headlines for what he said before the election began. John Rustad is apologizing for his response to a question about putting healthcare workers on trial. CTV's Penny Daflos reports.
Vancouver's Cathedral Square is where a man lost his hand in a random attack and the site of the BC Conservative leader's latest policy announcements.
We are going to be creating a new statutory court to deal with minor offences
Around crime and public safety.
We need to make sure that we fight for guaranteed minimum sentencing in this province. This is a federal issue. We need to take on the federal government.
But once again, the campaign was overshadowed by comments John Rustad made in June and spotlighted by Press Progress.
Are you okay or for a Nuremberg 2.0?
A new bigger 2.0, sorry?
Nuremberg.
Nuremberg 2.0.
Yes.
Oh, yes. That's probably
I know that's a hard one.
outside of my scope.
I know that puts you on the hot spot right there for sure, but I had to ask.
No, it's fine. It's like I say, that's something that's sort of outside the scope in terms of jurisdiction of British Columbia. But if we would certainly be participating with other jurisdictions.
It's as absurd as it is appalling.
The backlash has been swift from healthcare workers in particular.
What we're talking about here is a far-right fringe conspiracy theory that is saying that medical professionals should be treated like war criminals coming out of World War II.
It also provided more fodder for NDP attacks.
To be entertaining suggestions that we would put public health officials, doctors and nurses who ran vaccine programs, who responded in the depths of the pandemic on trial similar to Nazi war criminals is shameful. It's bizarre.
On Twitter, Rustad says he misunderstood the question. Were you confused or not when you discussed this?
My comments in around that in any way relating the two, I apologize for that. I know that has offended some people, and it certainly was not my intent.
When asked to clarify whether he'd support putting healthcare workers on trial.
Right now in British Columbia, we have so many issues to address. People are dying in our streets from drugs. People are dying in our streets from crime. We have a huge affordability problem.
Coming up next, a man that was called a prolific offender got arrested after stealing a police vehicle. Welcome back. $10 a day childcare was a major promise that was made by the NDP back in 2017. And now fast forward to the present, and the pledge still hasn't been fully realized as of yet. But as documented by Rob Buffum, David Eby was making more commitments on childcare recently.
Childcare was front and center today for the NDP, its leader David Eby promoting the party's campaign promises.
The school day is just a portion of the day. and your kids still need care outside of those hours.
The NDP plan calls for $500 million over 2 years to build more childcare facilities. A promise of an educational assistant, an EA, for all classes K through grade 3, a mental health counselor at all schools, and expanding on-site before and after school childcare.
The capital budget is great news. We need more spaces. We need them to be long-term public assets.
Still, childcare advocates say the plan isn't bold enough.
Still not enough to meet the demand. And of course, the growing demand as more folks move to our province.
Gregson wants to see a pay grade implemented like other provinces have done to increase wages and attract more badly needed early childhood educators.
We need to recruit and retain more qualified folks to work in all those new childcare programs.
The Conservatives also rolled out a daycare plan last week, pledging to keep $10 a day daycare, prioritize single moms, and increase private sector involvement. And note, the NDP promised universal $10 a day daycare within 10 years in the last 2 elections, a goal far from fulfilled.
This is an NDP government that's now campaigned 3 times in a row on actually providing childcare. 3 campaigns, they failed. And one of the main reasons for us is because they continue to shut out the childcare providers that are actually working in the private sector.
Some 10% of licensed daycares are now $10 a day, but fees at most daycares have gone down. Still, wait lists are common, and many young families continue to pay hundreds of dollars a month.
I think it fits into the narrative of affordability. I think one of the overarching issues for this campaign is affordability.
Meaning, expect to hear more about each party's plan to make childcare more accessible and affordable over the next 12 days.
According to a recent report, some unapproved modifications may have contributed into a fatal crash of an ultralight aircraft in northwestern BC back in June of 2023. The Transportation Safety Board stated in that report that a 2-seat Savannah aircraft crashed into Simpson Lake near Chetwynd, killing the pilot, who was the only person on board at the time. The report from the board next said that a review of the wreckage found that the plane had both engine and wing modifications, and neither of them had been approved by the manufacturer. The report concluded by saying that the modifications in question were made by someone who had owned the aircraft previously. A 41-year-old man that police refer to as a prolific offender faces a number of charges after allegedly stealing a Vancouver police SUV and going on a reckless joyride. One bystander was injured, and as CTV's Ben Milger reports, families with small kids were in the park and ran for safety.
It quickly became apparent to people near Templeton Park the person behind the wheel of this marked VPD SUV was not a police officer, and this was in fact a very dangerous joyride through the park in a stolen car. It happened at 10:45 on Sunday morning as families played in the park.
I could see lots of kids in the playground. Luckily, there was nobody in the field that I could see, so that was some good news. But certainly the kids that were in the playground, they scattered pretty quickly.
A second police SUV then drove onto the field, colliding with the stolen one. An actual police officer can then be seen yelling at the driver to get out before a police dog took the suspect down as he tried to run away. Police say it began several blocks away when officers stopped to help a woman in distress near East Hastings and Semlin Drive. As they got out of the SUV, a man unrelated to the situation jumped in and drove off. VPD would not say if officers followed procedures for securing the vehicle.
Our expectation is that when our officers stop their vehicles to get out of their cars to help somebody, that somebody's not going to get in the car and steal it. They momentarily turned their attention towards the person they were trying to help. Then the thief got behind the wheel and stole their car.
Police say a bystander needed medical attention, but don't know if he was hit or injured while jumping out of the way.
We'll be working to follow up with that person to better understand what happened.
41-year-old Dustin Talio faces numerous charges, including theft of a vehicle and dangerous driving causing bodily harm. Police say he has an extensive criminal record spanning more than 2 decades. He has a bail hearing scheduled for Tuesday. Ben Milger, CTV News, Vancouver.
The Stanley Park Board recently got set to vote on whether or not to go through with the second phase of its tree removal plan, The first phase drew quite a bit of criticism from those upset about certain parts of the forest being decimated. But as CTV's Abigail Turner reports, the city says the trees need to be cut down in order to prevent a safety hazard.
It looks more like a tree graveyard than a thriving forest in some spots of Stanley Park.
It bothers me too. It bothers me to hear chainsaws and to see trees coming down.
And it could continue this fall if the park board approves the second phase to cut down and remove thousands of moth-infested trees.
What's concerning people is that it's only the beginning.
The logging has faced growing criticism, with advocates saying the science does not support the tree removal.
The hemlock looper is endemic, it's native, it's a part of the ecosystem.
And according to one UBC professor, that statement is true. But given Stanley Park's unique setting, it makes the situation much different.
That's a good question. Why not leave nature do its thing? Normally, that's what you would do if there was not so many visitors to the park.
The decaying trees create safety hazards. Even the hemlock trees that may appear fine on the outside can be rotting inside.
A tree fell on a car or on a person or destroyed a building, and those risks are real at the moment.
25% of Stanley Park's forest area has been targeted so far, and if approved, the next phase would see another 11%. 160,000 trees in Stanley Park will be removed once completed.
If we were up in Whistler, we were in the interior, and there weren't people around, and there wasn't a highway driving right through it, I probably would have had a different approach.
Since the park board has started cutting down trees, 25,000 new ones have been planted here in Stanley Park in the meantime. But experts say it could take years before they grow tall enough to fill the holes of the forest. Abigail Turner, CTV News, Vancouver.
Turning to tonight's weather, the north coast will be home to a few showers as well as a low of 8 degrees. The Terrace-Kitimat area should see a few showers as well, while the low sits at 7 degrees. And the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District will deal with a chance of showers, but their low will be down at -1 degree. On the north coast, the next week or so will contain essentially all rain and clouds once again, while the high shifts from 11 to 13 degrees. In the Terrace-Kitimat area, the week for them will also be similarly full of clouds and rain, as their own high bounces from 9 to 11 degrees. And in the Bulkley Valley and Lakes District, their upcoming week might get a little bit more sun over a span of a few days, but will still see its share of rain and clouds too, while the high moves between 10 and 12 degrees. And now checking out the highways, visit Drive BC for the latest and up-to-date conditions, and as always, drive safe out there. On Highway 16, there is bridge maintenance, other maintenance, utility work, construction work, and paving operations. Highway 37 has some pavement patching, utility work, slippery sections, and roadside brushing. And there are some paving operations and construction work on the Nisga'a Highway. And this is what the roads were looking like this afternoon around the region from the view of the province's highway cams. Still to come, the Israel-Hamas conflict has had various consequences, and not just in the area where the battle is happening. Welcome back. 1 year ago, Hamas inflicted the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust. The horrific massacre happened half a world away, but it forever changed the lives of some in Vancouver. Those whose loved ones were kidnapped, and those who were mourning a young man killed in the attack. CTV's Kevin Chirac has more.
The lights were turned on 1 year ago today.
I said that I'm not going to turn it off until all the hostages will be safe at home.
Rudy Mizrahi's aunt and uncle lived in kibbutz near Oz, located close to the Gaza border. She spent time there growing up. It's where she learned how to swim. On October 7th, a place filled with happy memories turned into a scene of horror. Hamas killed, burned, and kidnapped many, including her aunt and uncle.
I feel very sad. I'm very angry.
Her aunt, Yochke Lifshitz, was released early in the war. Her 84-year-old uncle Oded, a retired journalist who used to volunteer and drive cancer patients living in Gaza for treatment, still among the more than 100 hostages whose whereabouts are unknown.
Every day.
On this grim one-year anniversary, Mizrahi reflects on her family and the many lives impacted on this tragic day.
Also, a good friend of mine lost his son on October 7th, and we lost a very good friend, like family from Vancouver, Ben Mizrahi.
Ben Mizrahi, no relation to Rudy, graduated from Vancouver's King David High School. He was one of the hundreds killed that day by Hamas at the Nova Music Festival, reportedly as he was helping a friend who was shot.
Even to the very end, he was always about helping others, and he died, from what the reports are, helping others.
Today, King David's staff and students held a private ceremony for Mizrahi and others killed or kidnapped.
It was a day of reflection and a day to be together, to sort of come together as a community on an anniversary of a very hard day.
Meanwhile, Rudy hangs on to a fading belief for her uncle in a war she sees no end in sight.
All we have to do now is to hope and pray that for a miracle.
Kevin Chirac, CTV News, Vancouver.
This has been a difficult year for both sides of the conflict. Jewish places of worship have been targeted, and the Palestinian community struggles with ongoing deaths in Gaza. CTV's Yasmin Gadib has more on one local restaurant owner who's been the target of online hate.
A solemn and emotional day for Israelis and Palestinians. The October 7th attack saw more than 1,200 Israelis killed and has left more than 41,000 dead in Gaza.
One of the things that kept us going and gave us hope and energy is the way the larger community here in Vancouver responded and interacted with what's happening.
Sobai Al-Zobadi owns Tamam, a Palestinian restaurant in Vancouver. The restaurant is filled with messages of solidarity for the Palestinian community.
There is a sense of empowerment and a sense of the need, urgency to organize, urgency to mobilize, urgency to get in touch with each other.
Al-Zobani spent his childhood in a refugee camp near Ramallah. He says his eatery has faced harassing phone calls and negative online reviews.
Calling us terrorists, calling us Hamas supporters, etc., etc. It lasted for like a few months.
But he's used his food to help people in Gaza.
Usually we close on Sundays, but we started once a month. Every Sunday we open for fundraiser. So we continued. Now we raised about $95,000.
Meanwhile, the local Jewish community has been facing anti-Semitic threats, including an attempted fire at a Vancouver synagogue earlier this year.
In the public domain, and we are very concerned with the rise of anti-Semitism.
Police have set up additional cameras at places of worship, and a mobile command center has been deployed at the Jewish Community Center.
But we shouldn't have to need that kind of protection to be able to attend our places of worship.
In the year since, thousands of protests have taken place across the country, with pro-Israeli demonstrators demanding Hamas release the hostages, while pro-Palestinian voices have called for a ceasefire and peace between the two sides.
And now we turn our attention to the stock markets. The Canadian dollar is down 26/10 of a cent, the price of gold is down $30.60, oil is down $3.57, natural gas is down 2 cents, aluminum is up $1, in Toronto the TSX is down 30.20 points, the Venture Index is down 4.64, and in New York the Dow Jones is up 126.13, and Nasdaq is up 259.02. Still ahead, a couple is offering a different kind of reward to try and get help in finding their dog. Welcome back. An Abbotsford couple desperate to find their missing dog have offered an enticing reward: tickets to the final night of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour at BC Place. CTV's Shannon Patterson now on what they're calling their Hail Mary attempt to bring home their beloved pooch.
When Dustin and Holly Gilding adopted a Great Pyrenees puppy in March 2022, they knew George would grow into a very big dog.
Dustin and I are both around 6 feet tall, so we like having a big, cuddly guy.
George eventually grew to 115 pounds. On September 18th, a family member took him for a walk on the Matsqui Trail in Abbotsford. About 2 kilometers in,
They came across a coyote, and George, being the guardian dog that he is, kind of took off after the coyote in kind of defense of the family member.
Despite extensive searching, there's been no sign of George since.
It's been just shy of 3 weeks by now. Hope is starting to fade a little bit, we can't lie. But at the end of the day, we were just kind of thinking, what kind of Hail Mary can we throw out there to at least make sure that as many people as possible know about this situation?
Holly knew she had something valuable she could offer as a reward, something Dustin surprised her with on her 29th birthday. Tickets to Taylor Swift's final Eras Tour concert, December 8th at BC Place.
What is going to get people's attention? What's going to get clicks? Anytime that you see Taylor's name attached to anything, it gets some attention. So being able to associate, her star power to our little dog, it was worth a try.
So Holly decided to blitz social media with an enticing offer: find and return George, and those Taylor Swift tickets, which Dustin was lucky enough to get at face value, are yours.
I supported it completely. Resale value is high. The value of going to the show is high, but at the end of the day, I don't think there's really any reasonable price that we wouldn't pay if somebody had information to lead us to George.
They believe someone may have taken George, or he could be surviving in the bush around Matsqui Trail.
He's definitely a robust guy. He's a Great Pyrenees mix. They're very smart dogs. They're very resourceful.
They hope the lure of impossible to get tickets will bring Swifties to the search and bring their big cuddly guy home. Shannon Patterson, CTV News.
Police say a woman's charge has been upgraded from aggravated assault to second-degree murder in the stabbing death of another woman in Surrey earlier this year. Surrey RCMP say officers found a woman suffering from stab wounds early in the morning on September 8th. She was taken to the hospital where she died several days later. The female suspect was charged with aggravated assault 2 days after the stabbing, but police say the charge has been upgraded to second-degree murder and the 36-year-old remains in custody. A totem pole with roots in BC that has come down after standing for more than 50 years on the grounds of the Manitoba legislature. The 5-meter-high pole was unveiled in 1971 to mark the 100th anniversary of British Columbia's entry into Confederation. It was made by Henry Hunt, a First Nations carver from coastal BC, and depicts a legend of Indigenous people from the West Coast. The Manitoba government says the pole deteriorated over time, and in keeping with tradition, it will be laid in a raised planter bed where it will decay and return to the earth. That is all of our news for now. From all of us here at CFTK-TV News, I'm Cale Maslin, and thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.